Bobby Schindler, of course, is the Executive Director of the Terri Life and Hope Network, which works to protect the lives of the mentally vulnerable and disabled. Brother Paul O'Donnell is a religious superior of the Franciscan Brothers of Peace, headquartered in the Archdiocese of St. Paul in Minneapolis. And if you'd like to read the rest of their bios, they're in your blue book. And at this point, we'll turn it over to them, and thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Just by way of introduction, I became involved in the Right to Life movement in 1973 when the Roe versus Wade decision was made, and have been active in all kinds of pro-life work. And a close friend of mine who eventually became a brother in our religious community, when he was 32 years old, contracted a sudden bacterial pneumonia, went into cardiac and respiratory arrest, and was in what they call a persistent vegetative state. And although I had been involved in the pro-life movement for many, many years, I wasn't aware of the anti-life forces that were out there in our hospitals and nursing homes and institutions. And at the time, I was caring for Brother Michael in the year 2000, and he was in this brain-injured state. And I recall a little clipping in the paper about a brain-injured woman in Florida, and the husband wanted to have the feeding tube removed, and the family was fighting. And my thought at that time was, the court possibly couldn't do this, not with a mother and a father and family wanting to care for this individual. And quite frankly, at that time, I didn't think it would happen. And of course, it did. In 2011, the first time the court ruling came down, or February 11th, the court ruling came down that the feeding tube could be removed, and that was the first time. But then, you know, through a long series, and Bobby will share more, this feeding tube was reinserted. She went many, many days without food and hydration. And I thought, we're going to win. We're going to win. Then, in 2003, I was doing a workshop at the National Right to Life Convention, or 2004, and a person, actually this guy behind me, Bobby Schindler, got up and spoke. I think it might have been the first public speech he ever gave, and he was telling the audience about his sister, Terri. Now, in 2004, my friend, Brother Michael, had passed away. But when I saw that video, I just immediately connected to Terri. And so I went up to Bobby and I said, I want to help. I want to be involved. I got to be a part of this. And our brothers are willing to help. And I think he probably thought I was a little flaky at the time, but I said, no, I really, this is my calling, this is my passion. And then in 2005, the ultimate last days of Terri came to be. And I'm sure, like many of you, we all became a part of Terri's family. Wherever I travel, wherever I speak, people will say, I was watching, I was there with you. I was watching and praying every day. And so I'd like you for a minute to go back to 2005, year 2005, to March 18th. And that was the day that Terri's feeding tube was removed, the last time. So many things were going on, so many things. And to make a long story short, the United States Senate, the United States House, passed legislation to try to save Terri. Congress had voted. The president came back on Palm Sunday, Palm Sunday, to sign the new federal law that would protect Terri from being killed. And they waited till 1 minute after midnight, so it was technically Monday, so they could do the vote. And of course, we were all thrilled that Terri's life would be spared. Well, it wasn't. And the agonizing 13 days of this woman clinging to her life, it was a time in our country when this was really a time when people were being misled by the media, but yet, I mean, people at the Vatican, our Congress, people in Egypt and Germany and Switzerland, people all over the world came to know who Terri Schiavo was. As most of you know, the sad reality is that we lost the battle to save Terri's life. But the family decided that through that great tragedy, they wanted to help others, that no one should have to go through what they went through. And so that is how basically the Terri Schiavo Life and Hope Network came to be. It's Terri's legacy. And before I turn it over to Bobby, and then I'm going to come back up in a little while, I just want to acknowledge especially Terri's mother, who's here with us today, and say how proud we are of what she and her husband Bob did. You know, Terri wasn't the first person starved and dehydrated to death in this country. It was going on way before, in 1985, and we were dealing with cases here in the United States. There were many people. The reason the world came to know Terri is because she had a mother and a father who were willing at all costs to stand up and do the right thing. And that came with a toll. It came with a toll. But now we're here to try to help others. And so we're going to have Bobby make a presentation, then I'll come back up here and then we'll discuss what we can do today to try to save the lives of other people like Terri. Because it's not just about Terri, it's about the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people all across the United States, just like her.
Thank you, brother. And thank you all for being here today. I appreciate it. I have a PowerPoint presentation just to kind of show you as I speak here this afternoon. But brother's right with what he was saying with the people that are currently really in the crosshairs of a very aggressive and growing anti-life establishment organizations that are happening occurring in our nation today. People will ask me, why are you guys still talking about Terri? Why are you out there? This has happened, it's going on 8 years now. This is March 31st, 2005. Was the 70th anniversary of Terri's death. And the fact of the matter is that this issue did not die with my sister. And as brother alluded, it is happening every single day in our nation. And what do I mean by that? We're not really talking about people with cancer or terminal diseases. We're talking about people with cognitive disabilities that would live a normal lifespan as long as they're provided the same basic care that we all receive, which is food and water. So when people kind of frame this argument as an end-of-life issue or discussion, it's really somewhat deceiving because Terri's situation really wasn't an end-of-life. It became one when they took away her feeding tube. My sister was not in a coma, and I'll explain more of this in a moment. She was not in a coma, she was not having a terminal disease, as I said. She was on no machines. She was simply a woman with a brain injury and receiving basic care via feeding tube because she had trouble swallowing. But nevertheless, what happened to Terri, I think a lot of people thought as they watched this case kind of unfold in front of them that this was the first time this was happening in our nation, and it wasn't. Food and water has now become medical treatment through feeding tubes. People don't realize that it was once defined as basic care. It's now defined as medical treatment, artificial life support, extraordinary care, and because of that, it makes it rather easy, depending on what state you live, to deny it to individuals, those like my sister. And so that's why we're doing what we're doing today. When we talk about Terri's legacy, we are out there now. We have different objectives of our organization, and the main objective is to help other families that call us for help. But it's also to educate and spread as much awareness as possible, because people are very confused by this issue because of the mainstream media, which I'll prove in just a few minutes for you. So there needs an enormous amount of education and awareness so people understand this issue, because there really is a dangerous apathy that exists, and why it allows and enables what happened to Terri to happen every single day in our nation. And I think it's pretty chilling if you hear, and you'll see some examples of really what I'm talking about. Just a couple of testimonials. These are from we've been involved in over 200 cases. Well, it's probably more upwards of 500 cases since we started Terri's foundation back in 2005 with families that have contacted us for help. We provided support for probably 2-3 times that, the amount of people. We're getting calls all the time. There's some weeks that are quiet. There's other weeks that are extremely busy with cases that we get in. It's just, I think the more people realize that we're out there to help and we're available, the more calls we receive. But we've been involved in many cases where we've had successful outcomes, where we've helped families save their loved ones. It's all because of my sister Terri and what she went through that has enabled us to be able to provide this help to other families today. As I mentioned before, Terri collapsed in 1990. She was 26 years old. We still to this day do not know what caused Terri's collapse, but she was at home alone with her husband Michael. She went several minutes without oxygen, and that led to a profound brain injury. From that moment on, she was dependent on others for her care, like the hundreds of thousands of other people in our country today. But after a short time in a coma, and really a life-or-death touch-and-go situation in the first few days, Terri emerged from the coma and really just became self-sufficient, other than the food and water she needed because of difficulty swallowing, and then of course the care that she needed from others. But from that point on, shortly after her collapse, there was nothing other than food and water through the feeding tube that was keeping my sister alive. And you'll see in a moment when I go through the presentation why it seems to me that there's this ongoing push to try and convolute and try to continually justify and rationalize that what they did to Terri was okay, because they want it to be okay. They want us to be desensitized. They want us to accept this, because I think ultimately it comes down to finances. And they look at people like my sister and others, the elderly, as a drain on society, not being able to give back, the huge cost-benefit ratio with our healthcare system today, and really in the best interest of hospitals' bottom lines and other institutions, it's best that we can easily kill these people, and that's exactly what's happening, because it's being accepted more and more every day, really. Just a couple of things more about my sister. The picture on the right, she was receiving aggressive therapy and rehabilitation back in the first couple of years, and she was responding to this. She was starting to improve in her medical files. It is noted that she was starting to speak, form words like mommy and stop, and this was during her therapy and rehabilitation. And you can see the picture of 1990 while she was getting therapy and rehabilitation. She was being very well cared for. She was getting her hair done. She was being taken out. All she needed was a wheelchair. She could have been taken anywhere, but she was putting makeup on. And you see what happened to my sister to the right in 2002. That had been over 10 years where she was basically abandoned in a warehouse. Sometime in 1991 or 1992, Michael Shivo, who was her husband and also her guardian, basically put Terri in different nursing homes and abandoned her, and stopped all therapy and rehabilitation. And Terri deteriorated, which any person with this type of brain injury would if exposed to that type of non-treatment. And the one thing that used to upset me so much with when this case became more and more public was Michael and his attorney would go on the air, national TV, and they would say, look at this poor woman, look at the situation she's in, look at her quality of life, look how poor it is. The best thing to do would be end her life, so to speak. when they were the ones responsible for causing her poor quality of life because of her lack of therapy and rehabilitation. She was even denied basic range of motion. She was literally abandoned and put in different nursing homes without any type of stimulation, therapy, rehabilitation. And many people are surprised when I tell them that they thought this was the way it had to be with my sister. But the fact of the matter is, she needed just a wheelchair, as I said before. If Terri were alive today, she could be here with us. All she needs is a wheelchair. We could take her anywhere. That's just something that was really misrepresented through the media and through Michael Schiavo and his attorney. Really, the question here, and again I alluded to this before, food and water now being defined as medical treatment, artificial life support. It's really what's enabled the healthcare professionals to end the lives of people like my sister, the elderly, and so many others. And it's put at risk hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people in our country today. And that's what we're up against, the redefining of food and water. If we were to do one thing really to stop much of what's happening in our country today, it would be to redefine food and water as basic care. The Catholic Church recognizes food and water as basic care. They have not changed their position on food and water as the medical community has, the secular community, redefining this as medical treatment. This was a report back in 1987. Yes, ma'am.
The food and water then through the feeding tube is that something that, even though it prolongs the life of a person who may be, in this case, and not in this case, not in your sister's case, I'm so sorry that you lost her, I can see the pain in her face, but, and your mother's pain wasn't severe, but I'm wondering, for people who are terminally ill, or, my grandmother was 95, and
Right.
there was a decision whether to continue with the feeding tube, which they told my mother would help her live longer, because I myself got gravely ill at one time, and I had experienced a feeding tube, and the doctor wanted to take it out at one point. I wasn't ready yet. I was just starting to feel better, like nutrients were actually going into my body. So, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well-
What is the standard now for people who are in a crisis situation or are terminally?
It's really a case-by-case basis in those situations. I mean, there are times where it is appropriate to stop food and hydration, but what our foundation does, and the individuals we focus on are those like my sister, those that are not dying and are only being sustained by food and water. Okay, so we try not to get into these types of situations where there are all types of questions with someone who's terminal, someone that might be hours or perhaps days away from death, because that's really a case-by-case basis, and those circumstances could be different for each person. But situations like Terri, and I say it over and over again, those that are non-terminal, that are not dying, that are able to assimilate and metabolize food and water through feeding tubes, then my belief is that we are morally obligated to care for these individuals. So I don't know if that answered your question or not, but that's kind of that's why I say we're not here talking about those in terminal diseases that are close to death. We're talking about those that would live a normal lifespan if provided food and water. There's a lot of reasons why this is happening in our country today. There's a lot of reasons why we've become more and more desensitized, and I speak in general terms. Of course, I don't mean all of us, but I think a growing majority of people have come to accept this and become desensitized to the value and dignity of everybody's, of the lives of everyone. But there's a lot of dynamics and influences, and why I think more and more people are accepting this type of care for those like Terri. And I just put a few of them up here, and again, why I think because of this influences and because of this this indoctrination of accepting whether life and death decisions based on someone's quality of life, I think more and more people are looking at what happened to my sister as perfectly okay or justified. I'm just going to focus on a few. One is the medical profession and the establishment of persistent vegetative state. Brother Paul mentioned earlier. This is a diagnosis that was they labeled my sister with this type of diagnosis. It is a diagnosis that is completely subjective. It is a diagnosis that there is a upwards of 50% misdiagnosed rate on it. It is not only a unscientific type of diagnosis within the medical community, it's dehumanizing and really, when you define someone as a vegetable, you're, how do I say it? Well, it's dehumanizing. I mean, we don't define any human being as a vegetable, but I think this type of diagnosis was deliberately or purposely created, again, to continue to indoctrinate us and desensitize us to really the value and the moral worth of an individual. But if there was one thing that I think it's become such common vernacular within our culture today to define these people in these types of conditions, I would say, one thing we can take away from whenever I speak in these types of workshops, I would say to stop referring to these people as being individuals in persistent vegetative state. They are simply human beings or people with cognitive brain injuries. Someone asked me that. I get that question. Well, if we don't define them, and this is a medical diagnosis, if we don't define them that way, how should we define people like this? And I said that they're simply individuals with brain injuries, and that is really all that we have here. But and again, these are some of the research that was conducted that validates what I'm saying with the misdiagnosis rate of those that are in this type of condition. So they're finding more and more. The one thing we know about the brain and brain injury is that we don't know everything about brain injuries. And there's more and more research that is being found that really continues to validate that this is a very unscientific and a very subjective type diagnosis. But what makes it so dangerous is when they're using it as a criteria to kill people, as they did in my sister's case. I just want to show you, again, this is just a short video of my sister. And the reason I show this is because, and to this day, they continue to describe my sister as being brain dead, as being a vegetable, being unresponsive, unable to interact, and it was simply untrue. And you also have to keep in mind that this is after Terri had been abandoned and neglected for upwards of 10 years. Doctors that examined Terri in 2002 when this video was made really felt as though it was remarkable that she had as much awareness and was able to react and interact as much as she was able to do, given the fact that she was neglected and went without rehabilitation and therapy for such a long period of time. But the voice that you hear in this is a neurologist asking Terri a question, really a command, and you'll see here her reaction, what her reaction is to the neurologist asking her to well, you'll see in a moment.
Terri, open your eyes up. Open your eyes. Terri, open your eyes. There you go, good. Good, good job, young lady, good job.
The reason, when the doctor was at, the neurologist was asking Terri to open her eyes, the reason it took her a few seconds is because she had a brain injury. And if you know anybody has a brain injury, it takes them a little longer, especially one like Terri had, it takes them a little longer to process what the person is saying for them to do. Now, Terri wasn't always this responsive. There was times we'd go in there and she wasn't very responsive at all. But there were times like this where she was extremely responsive. And it really proves that she was not in this persistent vegetative state diagnosis. But yet the judge didn't see it that way and continued to rule in favor of Michael to end her life. We also have the bioethics movement. And again, I'm just going through some different influences in our culture today and why so many of us are accepting this type of belief and treatment. The bioethics movement in the development of the personhood theory. And basically the personhood theory is that there are some people that are human non-persons. So, I mean, if you look at people like Peter Singer is a person that has strong beliefs in the human non-person type of personhood theory. And he sits on a chair with Princeton University. So we're not talking about professors that teach at these obscure colleges across the country. We're talking about a growing list of bioethicists that teach this personhood theory to our future doctors and nurses at these various universities in our country. And basically, if you look at who Peter Singer defines as human non-persons, you can see it's quite a list of people. And if you add all the people up that might fit under this umbrella, you're talking about millions of people in our country that can potentially become human non-persons. And what does he believe he can do with these individuals? Well, he believes it's justified to kill them in certain circumstances. In fact, when you have up here newborn infants, which is separate from Down syndrome, he believes that newborns up to 2 years old, after they've been born, we're not even talking about abortion here, we're talking about newborns up to 2 years can be killed if the parents decide that they want to kill their child because they are human non-persons, because they have no awareness of time. If you want to read some of the things that Peter Singer espouses, you should put his name in a Google search, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But there are, as I said, growing number of bioethicists that believe this same type of theory, where there are certain people that are human non-persons. These are just images of who Peter Singer believes and some other bioethicists that believe that these individuals are human non-persons. Does anybody know why I have Ronald Reagan up there? Because they're Alzheimer's, yes. And according to these bioethicists, those with Alzheimer's are basically defined as human non-persons. You also have ethics committees. Ethics committees exist in pretty much hospitals across our country today. Ethics committees can make decisions depending on what state you live in. It's easier in some states than others. Ethics committees can make decisions to end a person's life if they believe that this person's life is futile. Not the treatment is futile, but basically the person is futile. And this can, and what's so frightening about this, it doesn't even matter what our advance directives say. So advance directives may not even be worth the paper they're written on. When you have an ethics committee making decisions on whether or not a person is to continue to receive care. Again, depending on what state you live in, Texas is one of the worst ones in our nation, but you have a growing list of states that are becoming more and more acceptable, or where ethics committees are becoming more and more powerful and able to make decisions to end people's lives, even those like my sister Terri, where they're being sustained by simply food and water through feeding tubes. Again, I have up here where Texas, again, despite the patient's wishes, or even those that are advocating for them, if they're unable to speak for themselves, these ethics committees can come in and make decisions to end a person's life. Of course, you have the media in Hollywood. Again, all these outside influences, and we saw it evident in my sister's case. Even back in 2003, when this article was written by Nat Hentoff, who was a prominent journalist for over 50 years, where he became aware of Terri's case and started writing on it. Back in 2003, he saw just how the media was handling Terri's case, and this wasn't by accident. But if you see what he writes here, I mean, it's pretty strong words by someone who has been in the industry as long as he had about his brethren, his fellow colleagues. He believed back in 2003 there was already a journalistic malpractice when it came to reporting my sister's case. And you really saw the bias starting to build in Terri's case, and really doing their best effort to change public opinion on how Terri should be cared for and treated. These are just some of the icons, and I could list 3 slides of more and more people and groups and individuals that even have either spoken negatively about Terri or simply offensive in the way that they describe her. And I'm going to show you something. Hopefully it'll work in a moment. George Stephanopoulos, I've never pronounced his name correctly, but 2009 on ABC This Week, we referred to Terri as being brain dead, which is completely untrue. It's medically inaccurate to refer to my sister as brain dead. She simply wasn't. Would any brain dead individuals be able to react the way the doctor, after giving them commands, would react the way she was? Anybody that's simply being sustained by food and water, unless a doctor would say otherwise, I don't believe would ever be brain dead if they're only being sustained by food and water. Nevertheless, it continues today where Terri is being described as a brain dead individual. We did write a letter to ABC. They did issue, George Stephanopoulos did issue a correction, although it wasn't one that I was really, it was kind of a, well, anyway, but they did issue a correction on air a couple weeks later. Let me see if this is going to work, and I'll explain it. Yes, it looks like it will. This was a back in 2010, I believe. The Family Guy did an episode about my sister, and I hate for my mom to even see this, but you'll see how you'll see the influence of Hollywood, the media, and how horribly offensive the portrayal of my sister in this opening clip. And this is how the show opened.
I'm so excited for Stewie's first play.
You think it's a little soon for a musical about Terri Schiavo?
Or too late. Shh, it's starting.
Hi, Doctor. It's me, Michael Schindler. How's my wife doing? She's a vegetable. I hate vegetables.
Don't worry about her, Mr. Shivo. She's being kept alive by medical science.
Gee, look at all this stuff. How does it all work?
Well, I'll tell you.
This one keeps her liver clean. This one checks her pee.
How about this one over here?
Oh, that's just a TV. This one checks her heart rate. This one checks her veins. And this dispenses gravy for her mashed potato brains.
Oh, Terri Schiavo is kind of a lipo. What a lively little bugger.
Maybe we should just unplug her.
Terri Schiavo is kind of a lipo.
The most expensive plant you'll ever see.
There's only one solution. It's in the Constitution. We've got to pull the plug.
I mean, it really goes without having to comment, but they didn't even, I mean, it was inaccurate even the way they portrayed her because Terri wasn't on all kinds of machines. But not only is this offensive to Terri and her family, but really the hundreds of thousands of other people with cognitive disabilities and their families caring for them. Seth what's his last name? McFarland?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was on Larry King Live, and we were able to submit a question to him. They had contacted us. But they asked him about this, if he regretted doing this because of our family. And if you saw his smug, arrogant answer, you would see that why he did this in the first place. But, you know, really, who should we be upset at here? I mean, The Family Guy is one of the most popular shows in our nation. Should we be upset at him or at us? Because we're the ones that continue to watch this stuff. And if we weren't watching it, then they wouldn't have the advertisers and these types of shows wouldn't be on. So really, I think it's more a reflection upon our culture today that we accept this type of programming rather than this person that makes this type of horrible programs.
Bobby, was this on before or after her passing?
This was in 2010. And then finally, I just listed the clergy and theologians. And again, no disrespect to Father. Father was one of the very supportive clergy that we had defending Terry's life, and still does to this day. But back in really between 2000 and 2005, we had very little support, really no support at all, from our local diocese bishop. And it was really upsetting and frustrating to our family, really the lack of support that we're getting from the clergy back in the Diocese of St. Petersburg. I even think today there is a real lack of leadership, and there needs to be more of our clergy speaking out and defending this issue, because you just don't see the type of support that we see with the abortion issue. And I think this is an issue that is just as important. It's really, we're talking about the value and dignity of life here. And I hope, it seems to me that it has gotten better. And it would be nice to see more in the form of leadership when it comes to this issue. There was an allocution by Pope John Paul II back in March of 2004, a year before Terri died, where Pope John Paul clarified really the Church's position on food and water in situations like Terri. And again, I mentioned it earlier, but even though we have, as a society or in the secular community, we have defined food and water as artificial life support, as medical treatment, the Catholic Church still recognizes as basic and ordinary care. And if you ever have a moment to read the allocution, it's not very long, and it's so eloquently written as Pope John Paul's, what he wrote was. But he explains that if a person is not dying and is only being sustained by food and water, then we are morally obligated to care for the individual. So, and this was reaffirmed by Pope Benedict not too long after Pope John Paul II's death. March 18th, Brother Paul had mentioned that Terri's feeding tube was removed. It took almost 2 weeks before she died. The images of Terri are something our family can never properly explain. I put these pictures up here because people ask me what was it like, what did Terri look like, and this is really the only thing I can think of is back in Germany and Auschwitz when they were starving, dehydrating prisoners of war. And I believe in some way Terri looked much worse than the pictures that we see what was happening back then. And I also put up there about the fact that to starve and dehydrate an animal to death, it's a felony crime. And we don't even starve, we never even do this to our most heinous criminals on death row. It would be viewed as cruel and unusual punishment. But yet we're doing it to our most vulnerable American citizens every day in our country. And I just wanted to list really the numbers we're looking at here of people that are potentially exposed to this death movement or this attitude that is really gripping our nation today. If you break down and you look at the amount of people that are really defined as what? These human non-persons. You can see just how the potential numbers that this could affect. These are recent headlines. If you went through and I'm sure you don't come across these types of headlines, but working with this issue every day and reading about it every day, you can see just how much this is in the news every day and what's happening. And some of those are just are chilling to read what's happening every day in our nation. This is a case we got involved with not too long ago, within the last, I guess it was 2 years. And if you read that, this young lady was telling us about her aunt. This was her aunt that she called us to try to help. We couldn't really help her because she didn't have guardianship of her aunt. It was I believe it was her mom that had guardianship. And if you read what happens next, you can see why we should be so concerned. That they were starving, and there's nothing this woman could do. And there's nothing we could do. And she did die because she was being starved and dehydrated to death. Again, these are just some testimonials. This is one of Brendan, who was in a terrible car crash. And if it wasn't for his mom, the doctors would have essentially given up on him and let him die. But his mom was there to advocate for him. And today, Brendan is he's actually doing public speaking now. And just had a baby not that long ago. And he's doing very well. Again, Terri's legacy has led to us creating this network where we're now in a position to try and help others. Because this is something that is growing every day. This terrible attitude and this acceptance of whether people should live or die based on the quality of life. I don't have to tell you with Obamacare what this will mean for others like my sister, the elderly, and all these people that are exposed to this type of mentality. This is something that's bad now, and it's hard not to imagine this not getting worse. Something wrong. over and over again. We're always looking for doctors and nurses, attorneys to add as resources to our network. Really, when people call us, it seems to me that their biggest need is to find legal help. And we have a growing resource of attorneys as well as doctors that we can turn to and help families wherever they call us from. We've been involved in cases in every state of the country, every state in this country, and even internationally we've been involved in some cases. And we are now actually, one of the more exciting things that our foundation, our organization is doing now, we are beginning the steps of, we just moved to Philadelphia recently, and we're now beginning the steps of opening up a rehabilitation center for brain injured individuals. And we're hoping that maybe within the year that we'll really be in a position to start helping those with brain injuries by having our own rehabilitation center. So we're doing a lot to try and educate and raise awareness, and we just hope that more and more people understand really the importance and the urgency with what's happening in our culture today, and how it's going to get much, much worse if we don't start recognizing really how bad it is, and that these people need our protection just as much as the unborn baby needs their protection. These people that are being exposed to what's happening to them, like my sister, need just as much protection. Thank you. Now I'm going to turn it over to Brother Paul for a few minutes, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. Thanks.
I just wanted to mention that, as you've seen in the presentation, this happens all across the United States every day. And we're not just talking about the elderly or even someone who's 41 years old, like Terri was. There are people like Peter Keller, who was born with trisomy 16, and the doctors didn't want to treat him. And the parents were saying, you know, his abdomen is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. What's going on? And they said, well, it's just gastritis, and it's okay. And little Peter bled to death, 6 years old. We get calls. My father's 94 years old, and they want to put him in hospice, and remove his or stop treatment. And I'll say, well, what's wrong with him? You know, can he talk? Yes. Can he eat? Yes. He has a good appetite. Is he in a wheelchair or anything? No, he's fine. What's the problem? Why do they want to move him to hospice? Well, he's 94 and he falls down a lot. All kinds of calls. And this, we're talking about food and water. We're even getting cases now where they want to turn off somebody's oxygen or not give them assistance when they're in these critical conditions. This happens every day of the week, but very, very silently. And the reason it's gotten to this level is because while most of you, like me, became involved in this movement out of our concern for the preborn child in the womb, and that's right. And we're making great gains, and people are now more pro-life or identify themselves as pro-life than pro-abortion. We see that in our youth, that we're making great gains. People are educated. But what happened was, very quietly and very under the radar screen, groups infiltrated our hospices and our nursing homes, and they changed the level of care that people used to get. There was an organization called the Hemlock Society. Now they changed their name to Compassion and Choices. But some of these people sit on ethics boards and make decisions at some of our Catholic and Christian institutions. There are people within the Right to Life movement that somehow couldn't make the connection. Save the preborn child, save someone like Terri. They didn't see the connection. And we have to defend all innocent human life. Because if we're truly pro-life, if we're truly Christian, then we have to defend all human life. Every day of the week there are cases out there, people that need help. There are very few places they can go where someone knows where there's an attorney or a doctor or another organization or a contact, and that's when they call Terri's Life and Hope Network. I would put this challenge before you, those of you who are active in your Right to Life organizations, to give this particular side of the life issue equal treatment as we do the preborn child in the womb. As much as we defend the right to life of that preborn child, we need to defend the rights of vulnerable people like Terri Schiavo. We need to do it with our financial resources, with our education outreaches. We need to defend all life. Now, not everybody can do it all, but this is where you come into play. This is where you can have, like Terri's Life and Hope Network, come to your pro-life group to educate people, because there are many, many people that simply do not understand. And there are many people that need help. And just as this woman raised the question, you know, people don't fully know about what is truly euthanasia versus truly end-of-life issues. And we need to educate ourselves. And you could provide this service to your chapter or your organization and have someone like Bobby or someone from the network to give this message. If I was to ask probably everybody here in this room, more than likely, knows someone who either had an abortion or considered having an abortion. Everybody knows somebody. Everybody knows somebody. This will happen to your loved one or in your family or your next door neighbor or someone in your church. Somebody you know exactly what happened to Terri. It's going to happen. And you know, there's that old saying, you know, when they came after the Jews, I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came after, you know, the handicapped, and I wasn't handicapped, so I didn't speak up. And then they came after me, and I said, my God, why is no one speaking up? So the decision, the true sense of the word choice, is up to us. It's up to us to make a difference. And so I would like to invite you to be a part of the Terri Schiavo Life and Hope Network. There's no divided loyalties. You can be involved with National Right to Life and its affiliates. They're very supportive of our work, but we need your help. We need your help desperately. And we would be glad to talk to you after this workshop or anytime throughout the convention. Visit our exhibit booth and find out constructive ways that you can help make a difference. And before we have questions, just to conclude, the reality is, as we heard today with Obamacare, and the consequences that we are going to have in this country, that's kind of heavy upon everybody at the convention right now. Everybody feels that. But you know, there have been times of tragedy and hardship and persecution all throughout history. And as you can see by the way I'm dressed, I'm a spiritual person, so in every day and in every age, God raises up ordinary men and women and calls them to his service. So this is your call. I hope
questions?
Too many.
So when you're speaking with people about end of life in an acute care setting, and it comes to the discussion of artificial nutrition and hydration, how do you address concerns by medical professionals that providing fluids and food causes people to, quote, drown in their own secretions or decrease respirations or make it more complicated to breathe and uncomfortable? How do you respond to those types of arguments?
I've never had to field a question like that before. But brother might have.
I'm going to give a plug for my workshop on Saturday, because that's what this is all.
I think she was speaking about end-of-life
Right.
issues,
Right.
and we kind of distinguished between, that there's a difference.
Yeah,
between-
what I was going to say is, in my workshop that I do, I talk about what is truly end-of-life issues, what is euthanasia, medical advocacy, DNRs, DNIs, the whole thing. But to answer your question, if some of the things that they will try to say is if the body is not able to assimilate the food, that is a legitimate reason not to continue on. You know, and I've had experiences where people, if they can't assimilate, the fluid will find a way to get out of the body. So there are legitimate times when you do not feed and hydrate. But it's a sticky issue. When it comes to somebody's secretions, you know, and that, you know, in hospice care, you used to, you know, swab somebody's mouth out or use a suction machine. I worked in a hospice home, and that's routine. But they don't want to do that anymore. And sometimes people have been sold a bill of goods. And to make a long story short, a lot of times older people are tricked into signing a do not resuscitate order. And you know what they'll say? They'll say, well, if you go in and they do CPR, they might break your ribs. And you know, you talk to an older person that's 90 years old, they don't want to have their ribs broke. But you know, most places use the paddles. They're not doing the compressions that you see on ER, and it's a scare tactic. It's a scare tactic. So, again, I don't know if that really answered your question, but doctors tend to create very complicated possible scenarios. Like with Brother Michael, they said he will have reoccurring lung infections every 6 weeks if you take him home and care for him. And he did. He sometimes went for a year or two without anything, and he lived for 12 and a half years. So.
If we were to get a call like that in, if it was a case situation, someone would call us, it would be inappropriate. I'm not a doctor, so it would be inappropriate for me to try and handle that case. But what I would do is, through our resources of the doctors we do have, I would get that person a doctor as fast as I could, so they can consult with a doctor who will be in a better position to answer that field questions, those situations. And the doctors that we have as resources all adhere to our principles and policies and our mission as far as caring for those, like my sister, and kind of what I explained here today. But that would be something I would turn over to one of our physicians that we have as a resource.
Do you have any educational materials or resources for healthcare professionals? Like I'm a critical care nurse, so I've coded people and broken their ribs, and it happens.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, from a clinical standpoint, are there resources, or are there any plans to make any to address those kinds of issues?
That's a great. I'm sure there are.
Yeah. Well, the Catholic Medical Association has scholarships for, especially, I don't know about the nursing end of it, but for physicians, they hold conferences and encourage this kind of discussion to know what to do.
That helps.
One of the things, the baby Joseph case in Canada, I don't know, you know, that was something that they said, we can't do a trach because it'd be too painful for the baby. But then the same doctor said the baby's in a persistent vegetative state and can't feel anything. So there used to be a day and age when you could trust you know, just like a priest or a rabbi or somebody, you trust their word, you used to trust your doctor. They also said with baby Joseph that if they took him off the ventilator, he would gasp and die within hours. And when we were secretly having him weaned off the ventilator, he was going 14 hours without it, 15, and then was able to be taken off the ventilator and do fine and go back home until he died a natural death. But this is a scary thing in medicine today because we aren't physicians, and that's why everybody needs a medical advocate and needs to talk about this issue with their family, especially if you have somebody in a vulnerable state or elderly.
Yes, sir.
What about the possibility of civil lawsuits for medical malpractice? I mean, the insurance companies and the hospitals and the doctors might get their attention. If you basically, it sounds like we're talking about here really is medical malpractice.
That's why we have attorneys. We turn it off.
Do people get
Yeah.
financial settlements? I mean, the hospital gets sued a couple times for $1 million or $2 because of doing this kind of thing. It might just change some of their policies.
Well, I think you're right. I think, but the laws are now in a position where they protect these ethics committees and the fact that food and water is now medical treatment and is so easily removed from individuals because the law is defined that way. It protects them and allows them to take it away from people like my sister that aren't even dying, and then as a result starve and dehydrate to death. I mean, think about it. Something not that long. This is something that I say all the time. It wasn't that long ago where starving and dehydrating someone to death by taking away their food and water would be considered barbaric. But now it's become ordinary in our society today. Where are we going to be 5 to 10 years from now? And the laws are protecting these individuals. The laws are being changed, and I have to say they've been kind of flying under the radar. These laws being changed to reflect how easy it is now to kill an individual, and how well accepted it's become. Where are we going to be 5 to 10 years from now? So certainly, I think yes, we need to do something to change public policy, and then perhaps maybe through lawsuits or I don't know how effectively that.
In Florida, there's a cap now. It's $250,000.
Yeah, but I guess it just depends on what it is that you're suing the person for. But it's a good question, and maybe someone should try. Maybe it would change some things if that would happen.
But in short, to have a lawsuit, you have to be breaking the law, and it's not against the law.
Well, yeah, that's I guess that was the long answer, the short answer to my long answer. Exactly. Yeah. Yes. So, any other questions? I think we're running out of time here. If you have any questions, we have a booth out in the lobby. Feel free. We'll be there all weekend. Feel free to come by. We'll be there off and on, and we'd love to have. If you have any questions, we have to answer them then. So, thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.